Yeah, so basically the holy name is, it is extremely powerful, and as you have presented in your lot of quotes you have used from Shastra. Um, so basically, when you chant the holy name, it destroys not just the present sins but also the future sins that we can imagine to commit,
Mm.
right? Which is also, I think you have shared from Brihad Vishnu Purana, probably, right?
Mm. Yes, correct.
That whatever you can imagine, the holy name can destroy more than that.
Mm.
So that's why, and Ajamil is a typical example of this, that he was committing sinful activities even after chanting the name of Narayan.
Mm.
Okay, so actually, it's not that the Yamraj, the Yamdutas came because at the time of death he started chanting Narayan Narayan. He actually chanted the name of Narayan earlier when he gave birth to his son,
Correct.
10th son. And so that particular moment, all his karma was destroyed, past, present, future, everything. Okay, now he was continuing to act sinfully because that was a semblance of his karma. It was not a karma actually, it was semblance of his karma. So just like you remove poison from the snake will continue to bite someone, but the biting of the snake will have no effect on the person because you have removed the poison from the snake, right? So
Yes.
this is the effect of chanting of holy name, and even for devotees also, it acts like that. So now there are two ways to see this. First is, if you commit namaprad, then what happens is the past karmas, or the reaction of the karmas, it will like, generally we say that okay, chanting the holy name will destroy all the karma. That is true, and especially when one chants the holy name in namavas state, okay,
Mm.
offenselessly. Now this offenseless chanting is different from pure chanting. So we are talking about offenseless chanting, which is the stage of namavas, the second stage, and the third and the ultimate stage is the pure name stage, which is Shuddhanam. So we have Namaprad, Namabhas, and Shuddhanam. So when we chant the holy name offenselessly, then it destroys all the karmas. But there is a chance that every one of us can fall down to the state of Namaprad. And this is what most generally happens with everyone. We chant offenselessly, innocently, or jokingly, in any way we chant the holy name, and then we destroy the karmas. But then, because of previous aparad or aparads in this life, we fall from namabhas to namaprad. And because we fall down from namabhas to namaprad, the karmas reappear. Whatever karmas were destroyed, they actually reappear. And that's why we see the effect of these karmas in the form of distress. So Vishwanath Thakur explains that it's only the offenses to the holy name because of which a devotee feels distress. Otherwise, a devotee ideally is supposed to be always blissful. It's only because of the distress that the distress is coming from offenses to the holy name, Namaprad. Okay. So this is one thing, Namaprad. And the second way to look at it is, I was mentioning about Namabhas stage. So now what happens to those who chant the holy name in Namabhas state and do not fall down to Namaprad stage? So the ideal example is that of Ajamil. He chanted the holy name at the state of Namabhas, and then he maintained that stage till the end of his life. He did not commit any offense. Now, one may, like, go through all the 10 offenses to the holy name, and one will figure it out that Ajamil did not commit any of these one offenses from the 10 offense to the holy name. Okay, because he did not have a guru. So he was like not, none of these offenses were applicable to him. It was not intentional also. So there, if you go step by step, we'll see that Ajamil was not committing any of these offenses. That's why he maintained a offenseless stage right till the time he
Mm.
was going to leave his body. Okay, but Prabhupada does make a important comment in his Nectar of Devotion Purport. I remember that Prabhupada says that this happens very rarely. So Ajamil is actually a very rare case, very rare example But at the same time, he's also, we can also learn from his example that if we maintain the Namabha state throughout our life, then whatever we are doing after the chanting of holy name once, whatever we are doing, it's all semblance of our karma. Now it is very interesting to know that the Lord will also, even though we say that holy name destroys everything, all the karmas and everything, but the Lord will also keep the semblance of karma going on. Why? For two reasons. So that the body is also a karma, result of karma, right? The body that you have received, that's also a result of karma. And if the holy name destroys everything, then your body will always, it will always be finished. So that means as soon as you chant the holy name, if it is namabhas, immediately your body will be gone. You cannot perform devotional service, and you cannot work upon anarthas, right? So that's why it is okay. Yeah, Haribol. Okay, sorry. So actually, my uncle had he just visited. Okay, yeah. So I was saying that one if one does not fall from namabhas to namaprath, then the semblance of karma is actually preserved, and this is specially designed by the Lord in such a way that the body is preserved so that you can perform devotional service. If the body is destroyed, because body is a reaction of karma, that's why if everything is destroyed, then the body has to be destroyed. That's why the Lord keeps the body as it is, and that's why it is said that semblance of karma is continued. So now this semblance of karma is exactly like poison which is taken out from the snake. Okay, so that means for us, even though we are committing activities, we are doing karma, but what is happening is the effects of karma are nullified. The reactions to karma are all nullified. We won't get reaction to any of these karmas that we are doing. Okay, so this is the difference between namabhas, maintaining the state of namabhas, and falling down from the state of namabhas to namaprad. Okay, that's why devotee will actually feel distress. Otherwise, if someone is maintaining the state of namabhas, and if he reaches the Shuddhanam platform, then he's always blissful. He's supposed to be completely blissful and ecstatic and always happy. That's why Prabhupada said that chant Hare Krishna and be happy. It's very simple. Just chant Hare Krishna and be happy. But it does not happen because we tend to commit aparadhs, in the process, and that is why all these anarthas or karma, it will reappear, and we will fall down to namaprad platform. So that will create some kind of obstacle in our devotional service, and temporarily we feel distressed about it. So this semblance of karma, that's why, see, what happens is devotees, we cannot judge devotees, because it may happen that some devotees are probably just continuing the semblance of karma, and maybe most of the devotees, they are uh, performing, I mean, they may be chanting with offenses to the holy name, so they are probably experiencing distress. But it is also possible that some devotees may just be continuing their karma, and this is the reason why we cannot predict and we cannot judge a devotee unless we don't know the devotee. Now, there are some devotees who may be performing some sinful activities, but at the same time, the strength of their devotion is also very strong. They are also very determined. And I do remember one example Prabhupada mentions one time of Kanch Kamini, the prostitute, who was a devotee of Krishna. Okay, so in Kolkata, years ago, there was one particular prostitute, and I think the name of that prostitute was Kamini, and somehow she was called as Kanch Kamini or something. So she used to like carry out her normal activities in the daytime, and in the night, sorry, in the daytime she used to carry out her devotion, all that, and in the night she used to undergo prostitution. So you see that there are certain devotees, certain example of devotees who maintain that sinful activity, but at the same time, the devotion is also very strong and they are committed. The sadhana is also strong. So they have certain desires which they are fulfilling, and at the same time, they are also devotees of the Lord in terms of worshipping with one pointed attention. Okay, so it's very rare, but it is possible. So there may be devotees who may be performing sinful activities. Obviously, we know that Krishna does not recommend that, and obviously, it is, in the Bhagavad Gita itself, it is condemned. Krishna also says that I will protect my devotee in spite of whatever intensity of sinful activities one will perform. But it is also mentioned by our acharyas that Krishna will forgive the devotee once, twice, thrice, but then he cannot continue to do it. So we have one way of seeing things, looking at that particular verse of Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna always protects his devotees, Name Bhakta Panishyati, and at the same time, there are examples, very rare examples of devotees who have continued to perform sinful activities, but at the same time, they are also advanced devotees. So it is possible that they may be continuing their semblance of karma, and maybe the Lord has. Okay, I do remember one very nice example. His name is Radhanath Maharaj. Once when devotees were discussing with him about why to serve Rajvasis. So when Radhanath Maharaj shared what is, like, they were asking him that what is the difference between serving Brajvasi and serving um, those who are not Brajvasis? Like, because we have these camps, Barsanai camp and that the Pandharpur camp and all. So why it is necessary to serve devotees, especially the Brajvasis? So then Maharaj gave a very wonderful example. He said that there was a dacoit, and that dacoit was performing all kinds of sinful activities. He used to kill people, he used to plunder people's house, and he used to perform all kinds of sinful activities. At the end, he was actually arrested by the police, but somehow he ran away from that situation, and uh, immediately he ran towards Bake Bihari temple in Vrindavan. And then what he did, he saw the deity of Bake Bihari, and then he left his body chanting the glories of Bake Bihari. So he said, Bake Bihari Lal Ki Jai, and then he passed away. So now Maharaj said that actually this dacoit was a Vrajvasi by birth. And apparently he had, in an external circumstances, he was actually engaged in all kinds of sinful activities. But at the time of death, somehow he was able to chant Bake Bihari's name, and he left his body in Vrindavan. So now how do you understand these things? So there are examples like this. These are all rare examples, but it's very difficult to know and judge what is happening with a particular devotee. What is their consciousness? What is the level of their consciousness? Definitely, from a dharmic point of view, it is condemned by the Lord himself. But we have to also know one thing, that the Lord is beyond all the rules and regulations. He is beyond dharma also. So in certain exceptions and cases, a devotee may also go beyond all these laws, rules, and regulations of the material world. Okay, so devotional, this is actually the proof that devotional service is transcendental. Now, obviously, even if someone is committing sinful activity, they will be punished for that. But it's not necessary that they will not go back to Godhead, or they will not be able to remember the Lord if they have performed that devotion to the Lord for years in their life. Okay, so yeah, I mean, see, what is this? What are these conditionings? These are temporary things. The Lord is always seeing the essence or the bhava of the devotee. Okay, as soon as the body is finished, all these anarthas are destroyed. Now, it's very interesting to note that why do we punish? Why does the government, why does the law and order punish a person? According to Shastra, they punish someone mainly because to give them the reaction for their sinful activities. If they do not punish him, then in the next life he has to suffer. But by giving punishment to that person appropriate to his sinful activities, the law is making sure that, or like we say that, okay, the laws of God, or making sure that the person does not have to suffer in the next lifetime. So he will bear the reaction in this life, and all the sinful activities will be destroyed by that reaction. So in the next life, we can continue a normal life. Okay. So see, this is the reason why the laws created by God, they punish someone, right? So that they are completely rid of their sinful activities and they get the appropriate reaction. So we can clearly understand from this that externally a person probably will suffer, but internally one's devotion to the Lord is transcendental. It is always preserved. Okay. So I just wanted to share a few aspects of Namapas, Namaparad, and why devotees also feel distress. And yeah, so whatever is happening to the devotees now, one of my question was that what is the experience that we get by chanting the holy name? Now, so one time I do remember that Gaurang Prabhu said that even after chanting the holy name with offenses, we are getting so much taste. So then what to speak of when we start chanting without offenses and Shuddha, pure name? What will happen, right? So that's a fact that even though we are committing aparadhs or offenses, but still we are getting taste in the spiritual life, and we are hankering eager to hear Krishna Katha, to hear about the glories of the devotees, to relish Krishna's pastimes also, to relish the pastimes of the incarnations of the Lord. It's so blissful, and it's so it gives so much taste also, right? So this is a direct experience of being connected with the holy name, connected with the process. And another thing that the most important thing is that you'll see the reservation of the Lord always. Now you can see the reservation of the Lord in different ways. When you are Kanishta Adhikari, which is basically you commit aparadhs, there's a lot of tendency to commit aparadh when you are a Kanishta, and then Madhyama is like almost destroyed, kind of Namabha stage, and Uttama is like pure stage. So you will see that at Kanishta stage also the Lord is reciprocating with us, not directly, but probably through his devotees more and more, and through his arrangements. Okay. Then when you advance to the state of Namabhas or to Madhyamadhikari, then what will happen? Most of the anarthas are destroyed, most of the offenses are almost destroyed, and you are almost at the stage of offenseless chanting. So you will see that the Lord will reciprocate with your desires. Okay. And there will be a more intimate connection with the Lord at that particular stage. So that's how you identify that the Lord is still reciprocating in all these stages. Okay. Now, in the beginning stages, it will be more impersonal. Then it will become more personal and personal. And then finally, when you advance to Uttama Adhikari, Shuddhanam, you directly see the Lord face to face with your material eyes, right? Which is obviously not material, because the body becomes spiritual at the stage of Bhav. So you see the Lord directly, but you'll see that there is a gradual, we can immediately understand and relate that how the Lord reciprocates with us, and the intimacy of that reciprocation also will increase. So the Lord will become more and more personal with us as we advance from Kanishta to Uttama, or from Namabhas to Shuddhana. Okay, so these are the two ways how we can actually experience the Lord's reciprocation, even if we are chanting offenses to the holy name. If we are committing offenses to the holy name, and even though we are distressed at certain point of time, but at the same time, the Lord will also preserve some taste for us so that we can continue the path and we rectify ourselves. So see, these are another reason why the Lord has kept the semblance of karma, is that the devotees can actually overcome their anarthas. They can work on their anarthas. If the anarthas also destroy automatically, then what is from our end, what effort we are putting? So love means that we put efforts. We express our love by working for the person, right? We want to work hard and we want to please the person, and we want to put efforts to please the person. So by putting efforts, we are actually expressing our love to the Lord. And so if there are no anarthas, then where is the effort required to show to the Lord that we love him? And that's why the Lord preserves the body along with the anarthas also. So that, so now this is a semblance of karma. In the semblance state also you'll have anarthas. At the same time, in the state of namaprada also, obviously you'll have to work on your anarthas. So in any case, you have to work on the anarthas, and this is how we express our love for the Lord, right? So, so this is just my thoughts on this. If devotees have any further questions or comments, then please let me know.
Prabhu, I had a question.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
us go by our own efforts?
Can you speak louder?
I'm asking, do anarthas go away by their own by our efforts, or is Krishna or Krishna can eradicate them?
Okay, yeah. So see, um, generally the Shastra says that whoever becomes a devotee of the Lord automatically develops the quality of the demigods. But what is the meaning of automatically developing the quality of demigods? It is not. It is automatic, and at the same time, it is not automatic also. So automatic in the sense that if you sincerely follow the process, which means that you surrender to the process, then automatically these qualities will come, which means that the Lord will arrange situations in your life in such a way that automatically you start developing these qualities on your own, because you'll start contemplating, you'll start working on it, you'll start working on your arthas, you'll realize, you'll recognize that you are very you're very sinful, or you have committed some sinful activity in the past, or you are not qualified for the process, but just because of mercy of devotees you are able to relish the path. So you'll start realizing all these things, and that, so these things, these realizations are automatic. A person starts following Krishna consciousness, and the realizations will be automatic because sincerely they follow it. And so, because Krishna says that whoever hears his message with sincere, with faith and attention, then the Lord personally in the heart will destroy all the anarthas. So that way, if you sincerely follow the process which is recommended by the acharyas, then the super soul starts working within us, and he will start destroying the anarthas and doubts, and he will also actually make us realize that we have to work upon ourselves, we have to focus on the mind. Now see, there's a transition from major details to minor details. As we advance more and more, we will start focusing on minor details, smaller details that we need to work upon. So we won't focus so much on quantity, but we will focus more on quality as we advance. Okay, so these things are automatic to us because these are realizations which will come, that okay, if, like, many times we feel that okay, I'm not even a devotee, I'm not even humble. Actually devotees, they praise like that, but we know what is our current situation and status, right? So we actually can understand that we have so many anarthas and we have to work on those anarthas, and that's how we will advance in spiritual life. So the realizations will give us that drive to start working on the anarthas. Okay, and that becomes an automatic process. But because you are putting an effort, it's not automatic also at the same time. That's why in the Damodar Leela also you'll see that why there was a need for two finger two shot. Why it was like that? Because just to show that one finger is actually representing your efforts, and without efforts there is actually no mercy coming in. So unless and until you put efforts, you cannot expect the mercy of Lord, and without mercy of Lord nothing can happen. Okay, so even if you are putting entire effort, if you are putting your best effort, and you think that okay, you are able to overcome certain anarthas, but you do not expect the mercy of Lord, you do not be dependent, then also you are bereft of, so you lack something, you will not be able to overcome your anarthas, because uh, the ultimate factor is the mercy of the Lord. So mercy of the Lord definitely is the ultimate factor, but to get that, to reach that factor, you must put efforts also. Okay, and so that's why it is like automatic and not automatic also at the same time. So is that okay, like clear?
Yeah. Got it, Prabhu. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this is how automatically the holy name destroys all these anarthas by allowing us to have the realization that we need to work upon these anarthas. Okay, because love means everything is chosen. It is chosen by us. It is free will. If the Lord will simply remove everything, then what great we have achieved. What, from our end, what love we are going to express to Him? What are we going to show to Him? Right? Uh, a mother, she has to undergo so much sacrifices for her child, and that's how she is showing her love. So how we will express our love to the Lord if everything we expect happens automatically? And that's also a very it's a robotic process where you just click some buttons and the robot will just keep doing what you want to do, right? Without any intelligence, without any choice. So that's why free will means we have to put efforts. There is no shortcut. There is no other way. Okay, so I hope that devotees understood the concept of namapas, namaprad, and the distresses that arise because of that, and the semblance of karma.
Yes, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, even in the highest stages of bhakti, there is still anarthas, right? Like in bhava and prema. They also
Yeah.
have.
So they are because of previous aparats, some severe aparats which are performed in the past, and obviously the degree of aparat will also depend on to which devotee, to whom you are committing that aparat. So if you are committing aparat to a uttamadhikari, the reaction will be severe, the most dangerous. If you commit aparat to a madhyama, then the reaction will be dangerous. And if you commit aparat to kanishta, it will be also of a lesser intensity, but still it will temporarily create obstacles in your bhakti. So aparad should be avoided completely. Okay. So you will, if you commit aparad to a kanishta, uh, then what will happen? You will not be able to advance much. The growth will be stagnant. Okay. And then obviously, if you commit aparad to madhyama and uttama, and then obviously your position is also important. If you are a uttama adhikari and if you are a kanishta, that will also play some significant role. But it all depends on situation and circumstances. I mean, generally, according to Shastra, we'll see that no matter whatever stature you are at, like the Bhagavatam and other Shastra, they say that Lord Shiva, whether you are Shiva or any devotee, any personality, and Krishna has set an example in his own dynasty that in spite of being the Yadus, because they committed aparats to Narad Muni, now Yadus are actually eternal associates of the Lord. So, in spite of that stature, also, when they committed aparat to Narad Muni, the entire dynasty was destroyed, right? So, irrespective of your stature and your advancement, if you commit aparat to a senior Vaishnava or a very advanced devotee, then it can actually destroy your bhakti. Okay. So, whether you are at the level of Lord Shiva or at the level of the Yadavas, so we have to be very careful about it.
Thank you, Prabhuji.